Across the Spider-Verse is a very special piece of storytelling and an absolute work of art. With over 300 million in the box office worldwide at the time of this recording, it's safe to say that it lived up to the hype it brought on following its predecessor. There's truly no other way to put it, man. This movie is beautiful, whether that be visually, in its storytelling, or in the sound design. The team behind this project have not only continued to raise the bar for what's possible in 3D animation in Hollywood, but they've somehow managed to elevate this medium's bar even higher than the expectations we had. As someone who's been a longtime Spider-Man fanatic and a fan of Miles Morales as a character, it feels so surreal to see his character and the Spider-Man franchise as a whole handled with so much love and artistic care. I could genuinely gush over this film for so many different reasons, but I just wanted to speak on a few standout points the film evokes and how masterfully it was crafted. So without further ado, let's take our trip across the Spider-Verse. So right off the bat, we have to talk about this movie's animation. When Into the Spider-Verse first released, it generally felt like a breath of fresh air and truly proved what a comic book movie is, even more so what an animated movie could and should be. And Across the Spider-Verse is no different, not only building on what made it such a spectacle in 2018, but continuing to pave the way for what's possible visually and artistically. It feels as though we're just now starting to see the lasting impact that the first film had on animation in Hollywood, from Puss in Boots to Arcane, and even the upcoming TMNT movie. Yet, Across the Spider-Verse somehow managed to go beyond what made the first film such a marvelous creation. To say that this film is artistic perfection genuinely feels like an understatement. To this day, Into the Spider-Verse has been my favorite piece of Spider-Man content, as well as what I and most people consider the peak of animation. Every part of this film's universe is handled with so much attention to detail that comic book lovers and casual moviegoers can appreciate and relate to. From the film's propensity of blending several different characters' animation styles, to the variety of different worlds each Spider-Person inhabits, each frame of this movie is crafted so meticulously. A standout, if not the most creative of those, being Gwen's universe of Earth 65 and its gorgeous mood-based watercolor aesthetic paying serious homage to Robbie Rodriguez's original 2015 Spider-Gwen issue #1 comic cover. The way the colors shift depending on the mood and the tone of Gwen and those around her is some of the most creative shit I've ever seen, and it truly adds to the vibe of the movie and in telling more of Gwen's story that we weren't able to see in the first film. On top of that, the universe doesn't just stick to the general color scheme and shifts whenever it feels like it, making it even more emotional in every scene. We're also introduced to the vibrantly colored world of Mumbattan, in which Peter Prabarkar inhabits, heavily inspired by Indian ACK comics. A good chunk of action set pieces took place here, and it was seriously such a great introduction for Peter, but we'll come back to him. One of my favorite locations that I wish we could have seen more of is that of 2099's Nueva York, which went above and beyond its inspiration of Sid Mead's illustration style of what he believed the future would be like. The entire chase scene that takes place here is one of the greatest feats of animation and sequencing I've ever seen in a motion picture, showing every single Spider-Person on screen with their own unique style and movement, which even upon rewatch, you can still find something new. The fact that they were able to make all of this in just 5 years genuinely blows my mind, and I hope the artists behind this series get some well-deserved sleep. Now, before we get into the fine details of the story itself, I wanted to touch on characters new and old that we see throughout the film's runtime. Easily one of the biggest standout characters in the film had to be that of Hobie Brown, aka Spider-Punk.
Alright, my name's Obi Brown. I was bitten by. What if you like to know? Yeah, man.
My man's truly stole the show in every scene he was in. His anarchic nature was so amusing and really elevated his character amongst the plethora of Spider-Men. While many people expected him to be a foil to Miles and a part of some sort of love triangle, he ended up being the exact opposite. After seeing Miles' act of bravery in Mumbattan, he becomes one of the first people to give Miles the validation he needs, not only to be his own Spider-Man, but as his own person in the bigger picture. The way he's animated like a living punk show tour flyer is so spectacular, and apparently 3 out of the 5 years this movie was in production was spent on getting his animation done right, and in my opinion, they fucking nailed it. I've always been a huge fan of Hobie and really enjoyed his recent solo run in the comics, so it was really great to see his big screen debut handled so well.
How are you even cooler under your mask?
I was just cool the whole time.
On the complete opposite side of the spectrum is Peter, who not only got a major upgrade to his suit in this film, but whose character was handled in the most hilariously entertaining way. Sony really gave us a prime example of a fuckboy Spider-Man, and to be honest, I'm not mad at it. This guy was so lovable, and it's just crazy to see a truly stress-free Spider-Man. Even the way his movements are animated was such a fresh take on the character, and I really do hope to see his growth in the next film. Of the returning characters we get to see, one is that of Peter B. Parker. And I've seen a lot of criticism online regarding him not getting much of a role in this movie, but I think he served his purpose. It was just really nice to see a Peter who's finally happy, who's endured all the same hardships as everyone else, and is still pressed on to live the life he's always wanted with MJ and their new daughter Mayday. Which I gotta say, this kid was so adorable and was the cutest form of hype this movie gave us. Even if we never get to see a grown-up version of her, it's nice to know that she exists in this universe. Now I've got to get this one off my chest, and I already know I'm going to get the entire 2099 fan base storming the comments section, but I've never liked Miguel O'Hara. Alright, now before you go and leave a dislike and a nasty comment on the video, let me cook. Yes, I've read every single piece of 2099 content. Yes, I've wasted hours that I'll never get back in my childhood playing Spider-Man Edge of Time. And yes, his suit is pretty cool, the advanced suit is much better. But as a character, he just never genuinely appealed to me. However, this movie's depiction of Miguel is truly the standout of them all. From the amazing voice acting of Oscar Isaac to his edgy no bullshit nature and the way he was cleverly used as one of the film's antagonists, not villain but antagonist, is some of the coolest takes on this character since the 90s. My man's was really out of pocket with his motives, but the way the film portrays what he's gone through, it's understandable. After trying to go against his own canon event and do things his own way and experiencing the loss of a family he never had, it makes total sense why he's so dead set on maintaining the order in the multiverse. You could genuinely feel all the hurt, the loss, and the subtle jealousy he had towards Miles and calling him the original anomaly, which is kind of bullshit. If you know, you know. Overall, I really enjoyed how his character was handled and the way his movements were so feral and aggressive in contrast with Miles' smoothness and fluidity. I really do hope to see him have a change of heart in the next movie. I also wanted to quickly touch on the Spot in this film, who for the longest time was considered a C-tier character in the Spider-Man mythos, but has become one of the most interesting characters in this movie. He starts out as a seemingly harmless joke and ends up becoming one of the biggest threats to Miles' life and the universe as a whole. All of his moments in the film are animated so creatively, his comedic timing is great, and it's really interesting commentary on the nature of superheroes and their arch nemesis. I'm so interested to see how he's handled in the next film with all of his accumulated power and anger towards Miles. And last but not least, there's Gwen, who at first seemed like she was going to be the major factor of change in Miles' life again, but which ended up being the complete opposite. We finally get to see her side of the story and her struggle admitting to her dad the fact that she's Spider-Gwen. We see her fight with her feelings of loneliness and not being able to open up to others. She's only able to do this after witnessing Miles take control of his own narrative and fight against the status quo of the Spider Society as a whole. And I've seen a lot of discourse over the whole Gwen is trans thing. Me personally, I'm not going to get into that whole debate because remember, at the end of the day, this is a fictional character with an already established backstory. I will say the way she comes out to her dad is definitely subjective and can be taken very differently by very many different people, which is fine because art is subjective and everyone has their own opinions. I'm going to chalk it up to Marvel's overall poor handling of her character since her debut in 2014 and the fact that most people just genuinely don't know shit about Spider-Gwen. Nevertheless, next to Miles, she definitely had the most character growth and I can't wait to see what she does next. This movie is emotional. It's about connection, family, and growth. Across the Spider-Verse continues to build on the foundation that was set by its predecessor and expands on characters in such profound and relatable ways. Even with an almost overwhelming amount of characters on screen at any given time, this is still Miles' story. First film's narrative was written so tightly, and Across the Spider-Verse delivers on this tenfold. Where Into the Spider-Verse focused more on Miles' relationship with his dad and him trying to live up to his expectations of him versus what he wanted in life for himself. This film beautifully handles the opposite side of that with his mother Rio. We've seen this young kid go from not knowing his place in the world and having to take up a role that he felt he wasn't ready for, to embracing that role and carrying a mantle while at the same time wanting to do it in his own way despite what the world thinks of him.
I'm gonna do my own thing.
The importance of familial relationships in this movie hits so hard and is intrinsic to Miles' life. He doesn't have an Uncle Ben or a Captain Stacy. Sure, he had an Uncle Aaron, but as overbearing as his parents can be, the love they have for Miles, the support system that they provide for him is what makes him unique. It's what makes him Spider-Man. When Rio tells Miles that no matter where he goes, no matter who he meets, to just remember that they won't root for him like them, that they won't love him like them.
Fancy places he's gonna be in, tell him that he doesn't belong there.
That shit absolutely hits home, man. And it's that love that gives Miles the strength to stand against Miguel and the Spider Society later on. In a way, it feels like such a cleverly weaved in metatextual commentary on how people in real life have felt for years towards Miles as a character. The writers so perfectly touched on this subject without even making it obvious. I've been so over the debate since 2011 of Miles just being Spider-Man but black, or Spider-Man number 2, or just flat out Miles isn't Spider-Man. If there were any piece of Spider-Man media that says it outright, it's this movie. Miles is himself, but he's also Spider-Man. Not just because he swings around on a web, but because he upholds the truths of what it means to be Spider-Man. None of the tropes used in this movie are new by any means, but it's the nuance in which these themes are presented is what makes it such a fresh take. This film raises the question, does Spider-Man have to accept the suffering that makes him Spider-Man? And that's genuinely so interesting. Seeing Miles go against the canon, against one of the most crucial catalysts of Spider-Man's origins, against all those people in that big place that don't root for him, and accepting himself despite being called an anomaly who doesn't belong is so powerful. Genuinely love this coming of age for Miles' character, and this film really proved that self-love and carving your own path in the world is what matters and makes us different. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, man, but this movie is beautiful, it's powerful, it's emotional, and honestly inspiring. A whole new generation of youth not only have a Spider-Man to look up to, but someone that is truly relatable to all, even if you can't actually see them, and that's incredible. The only bad thing I can say about Across the Spider-Verse is that it ended, but we all went into this movie knowing that it was only part 1, but my god, do I need the second part of this peak fiction now. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait until just next year to see the finale of this amazing journey, but I'm hoping for the best. Across the Spider-Verse more than lived up and exceeded the expectations of its predecessor. It's the new peak of animation. It's the next greatest Spider-Man story ever told, and it's a masterpiece. If you haven't already, please go see this film. I promise you it'll be the greatest 2 hours of your life and you won't be the same afterwards. If you enjoyed my ramblings and thoughts on the movie, consider dropping a like, a comment, and subscribing to the channel for future uploads. I've been Jiren Sama, and I'll see you beyond the Spider-Verse.